Welcome to the Red Couch Talk, Robert Durnford. How are you?
Good, thanks. And to yourself? Keeping
Yeah,
well?
great. It's a sunny day in Switzerland,
It
and
is.
yeah, I'm enjoying spring right now. Hope you do too.
Yeah, it's nice after all the we had that period of grey, rain, cold, fog. So now yeah, really nice to see the sun again. It does lift the spirits as well. So
Yeah, that's true. And Robert, why don't you start us off with a small fun fact about yourself?
yeah, I was thinking about this and actually and you're given the global mobility thread as well. So I grew up in France and
Mhm.
we moved there when I was probably about 15 months old because of my father's work. So he was working for a company in the UK. They had offices in France, and he was offered the opportunity to move there and take on a new role. And so we moved as a family. And I spent 10 years. You grow up in France. I went to French primary school, and it was wonderful. And it was also in the Alps, and reminded me a lot of when we then, about 3 years ago, we were offered the opportunity to move from London to Zug with work. And it sort of reminded me, almost felt like sort of coming full circle in terms of
Mhm.
Thomas, who's our son, is now 4, and he was about 15 months old when we moved, and being sort of in the lakes and the mountains. And I guess I'm very lucky. I had a wonderful childhood, and really happy memories. And yeah, I suppose that sense of hopefully yeah, we were able now to do the same for Thomas. So yeah, I guess that's my sort of fun fact of, despite being from the UK, growing up in France and sort of seeing a similar pattern now in my life that my parents had of that opportunity for Thomas to grow up in a different country, learn a second language and see what opportunities that gives him.
And does your son already speak Swiss German?
Yeah, he's in a
Fluent?
uh, yeah. I mean, he's now teaching us words, and he's in a local Waldgruppe, and yeah, I think give another year or two, and he'll be well ahead of us. So.
That's cute. That's cute. And yeah, so you probably can relate, to the advantage of being bilingual, growing up with two languages, not having to learn a second foreign language. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and yeah, I think it's an incredibly useful skill to have another language and just an appreciation for other cultures, other environments. That as well, I think, is really useful. So it's a great opportunity, and yeah, we're making the most of it.
Hmm. Yeah, so you already mentioned you live in Switzerland, you moved to Zug.
Yeah.
What got you there? Start from scratch.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, we have to go back. So, so I guess my early sort of education, if I go back as far as my education, was very much shaped around engineering, and
Hmm.
I studied engineering at university, and I think I've always enjoyed that uh, understanding how things work, from simple things like a bicycle. And I remember taking apart, a bike I had, and then having to work out how to put it back together, and the pleasure in that, and then the thing that turned into a sort of pleasure for also being able to help other people who had mechanical problems and being able to help them. And um, the that career in engineering started. I worked for an engineering company while I was still at university. And at that point, I sort of realized that I didn't necessarily want to do a desk job straight away. So I joined the army and joined the Royal Engineers. And that was something I'm really pleased that I did. And it was one of those, I suppose, the recruitment process was interesting. It's about 5 stages. And at each stage, I found myself more engaged and more wanting to sort of be successful. And I'm really pleased I did it. And I served in the British Army for about 6 years, and then left in 2012 with some really interesting experience. I think of people leadership, of operating in some fairly challenging environments, some fairly challenging situations, and I think all of that I was able then to sort of take forward into my commercial career. And then since then, I've had a range of roles in risk management, crisis management, physical security, and bringing that to where I am now. Of well, I suppose it's sort of over 20 years of experience now of dealing with impact events and challenging events and crisis events. And I think, um, yeah, I suppose that's what brings us to where we are now in here in Switzerland, and an opportunity to continue that line of work, and you continue to work in an interesting external environment. You've only got to look at the news so far in 2026, and there's been plenty going on from Venezuela to Mexico to the Middle East, and plenty of other things as well. I can't even begin to cover all of the
Mhm.
newsworthy events that have already happened this year, but there's been plenty. So
In global mobility, we have become very crisis oriented. I would say, like we have learned to become crisis managers rather than, the original intention of the job, managing a corporate move from one country to another, from, compliance perspective and everything else. I think now, we're more caregivers where, we're trying to support families, systems, individuals, business travelers, especially in those situations. How do you, how would you say, what characterizes the environment that we're currently in from a risk perspective?
I think you've already, in some ways, summed it up. Of it impacts us all now, and I think maybe well, certainly when I was in the army,
Hmm.
uh, and I was in explosive ordnance disposal, so sort of bomb disposal by another phrase, and uh, at times crisis management or certain elements of it was the role of a specialist, and you brought in, we were a specialist unit and came in to do a specialist task. And then certainly when I first entered the commercial workplace, it was similar as well, that you maybe had a risk team or a crisis management team or a security team, and they were sort of specialists that you sort of parachuted in for your situation. Whereas I'd say now, and especially post COVID, I think it's everyone's business. I don't think you can avoid it. And I think to your comment around global mobility managers have now become crisis managers, because the nature of the external environment, the geopolitical environment, means that all these situations will arise. And if I even look at recent years in the workplace, of from quite small things like maybe a power outage or a network outage that's disruptive, and all the way up to we've seen political upheaval, conflict, your natural disasters. It touches on everyone and every aspect of an organization. So I think you've already, yeah, like I said, neatly summarized it, that in some ways we're all becoming crisis managers to one extent or another, because these impact events are, and especially in a global business,
Hmm.
I think it's very hard to work anywhere in the world and not have an event that's going to impact you in one shape or another.
I agree. And one of the things that I find really interesting about your career and your attitude to leadership is that even though we come at it from very different angles, I have a feeling we're very much aligned on what is important to us. So could you talk a bit more about your idea of leadership, your driver, what is, how did you develop that kind of value system that guides your behavior?
Yeah, and another fantastic question. And I think I came from a military family, and I remember my grandfather, and that flowed through to my father, who didn't join the military, but that clearly that influence and his upbringing you've flowed through. And so I think when we talk about value sets and around, I think, integrity and moral courage, and doing the right thing, and I think that phrase of doing the right thing even when no one is looking,
Mm.
um, you was it was sort of instilled in me from an early age, and something I remember. And then, so I think when I joined the British Army, it was, and the strong values there around moral courage and integrity, that it was a natural fit, and I didn't really need to adapt because I already had that value set. And then you pulled that forward, and that falling back on, I think, your moral courage, your integrity, doing the right thing. And I think I'd say the other really important lesson I took from the military was the importance of people, and people work for people. And uh, I had some great leaders in the military, and I've had great leaders. I've worked for great leaders since as well. And I've been very lucky in that regard. But people work for people, and uh, the impact of having a great leader, that psychological safety, that space where you can maybe be a bit vulnerable, you can talk through problems and challenges, at times collaborate, have that support and that empathy. I know it's had a massive impact on my ability to do my job. So if I can therefore you pass that on to my team, and I remember going to a talk many years ago, and it was about sort of how do career growth and how do you promote and succeed. And actually, the advice of the keynote speaker was look down, not up. The people who are sort of too busy looking up are missing something, and look down, look after your team, and that's where you should be sort of focusing your efforts. And how do you support them, and how do you provide an environment where they can operate at their best? And I think that was something that I still feel very strongly about. Of how do I provide an environment for my team to operate at their best? And when I was a young army officer, I was by no means the expert. I had some very talented soldiers who were experts in different elements of the tasks we carried out. And the skill there is knowing who to deploy where and how to best use those individuals and how to get the best out of them. And that stands true today. I look at my team today. I've got some great experts, some great depth of expertise and experience, knowing how to best use them and to provide an environment where they can perform at their best. I think that's a really important part. And
Mm.
uh, probably my last comment on this is around it then all boils back down to authenticity. And I think if
Mm.
you're authentic as a leader, and that's I think a really strong personality trait. And I guess this is where leadership styles you can merge. And the British Army is very much modelled around servant leadership, and then I think more recently we've seen this authentic leadership as a leadership genre emerge. But I think there is space for a bit of both in your style, and they both bring great strengths and qualities to the leadership discussion.
I think that's excellent advice. And I think it's often not understood well. Like, as a leader, your job is not to just take care of the environment or the upwards management, but also, once you take care of your team, that will also lift you up. Fantastic advice. I love that. And also your comment around authenticity. How do you show that? How do you work personally on your authenticity? What are some of the things that you do so you can watch yourself in the mirror in the morning?
Yeah, that's another great question. And it's uh, I think it comes back to that. Would I do anything different if people weren't around or if people
Yeah,
weren't watching?
yeah.
And I think definitely that you're doing the right thing, even if no one's watching. Uh, and this is where I think also lead by example comes in. And I think there's a balance there, because what you don't want, I'm aware of not trying to look like um you're in any way sort of showing off, or I think you can sort of over virtue signal. But I think you doing important things like it might be simple things like taking our if for example, our company has a policy around care leave, and I've taken care leave when my
Uh-huh.
wife was sick, and our son required care, and sort of done that in a way that then hopefully shows to other people, well, there's a reason why we have these policies in place, and it's completely acceptable to make use of them. Uh, so I think leadership by example. I think sometimes it's taking on the difficult tasks or the boring tasks and showing that yeah these things need doing. But also, I think you're providing opportunities for people to step up, and providing opportunities for people to have a go. Yeah, for example, if I go on a holiday, then I have a delegate in place, and they're empowered to act, and it gives them an opportunity to see what's happening. It also gives me an opportunity to disconnect and have a break. So I think there's you probably all, yeah, if I was to distill it all down to it's leading by example and hopefully showcasing how I've been, I suppose, taught and when I've observed the great leaders I've worked for, what they've done, trying to showcase that, and then hopefully people can see that and take it as a positive role model.
Fantastic. And do you have more advice for a more junior version of yourself or more junior professional?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. If I suppose I'd say one that I've done and I would still do again and continue to do, and one that I would have done better with hindsight. And the one I think I've done quite well is just reading and engaging and having interesting conversations. And I think
Hmm.
that I still enjoy doing. I was very lucky. My mother was a prolific reader,
Uh-huh.
and she would take me to the local library, and we'd hire books. And I really enjoyed that, and I still today, I find it a great relaxing activity just to sit and read books, and a combination of interesting books around what's happening around the world or history, or there's so much you can learn. And I recognize now as well with YouTube and podcasts, there's a whole range of ways you can engage in interesting content. So that's definitely one I would encourage people. You read around your subject or areas that you're interested in, you're passionate about. Um, the one that I think in hindsight, would have done better is make more of the downtimes. And by that I mean is you're naturally in a role, there's peaks and troughs, and there'll be busy periods and less busy periods.
Hmm.
And I think earlier in my career, um, my temptation was to just stay busy and I must do more, and at times to maybe a bit of a detriment of my own health and well-being.
Hmm.
And you can't operate at 110% day in day out. You need to have those breaks and those downtimes.
Hmm.
And sometimes people will tell you to do that, but not always. And I think that would be my advice of when you have those troughs, so have those quieter moments, take that opportunity to think. Um, are you looking after yourself? Is your and it's and just you and I have spoken around about balance, and is your balance in a good place? A
Hmm.
good opportunity to check that. A good opportunity to take a couple of quiet moments just to think about where you're going, maybe with work or personally. What else do you want to achieve? What's on your sort of your larger to-do list? Um, and yeah, I think in hindsight, and maybe probably when I was in my 20s and a young army officer, I sort of there's an element of you that sort of you think you're a bit indestructible, and you
Yeah.
can you can get away with it when you're younger. And I've realised as I've got a bit older that um, I do need to sleep and I do need to recharge and I do need to find that balance. And that I think is something really important to sort of sustain this. You do need to look after yourself, and simple things like sleeping well, eating well, staying hydrated, doing some exercise. And probably my last comment on this is you consistency beats the beats volume. A little bit each day is better
Mhm.
than trying to do everything on a Sunday afternoon or whatever it is. So, but yeah, those would be the two bits of advice I'd have.
I think, yeah, these are very good tips for building resilience as well, and sort of, long-term longevity, for staying healthy, getting older. And I was just wondering when you said that, uh, have you ever been to a retreat?
No, no, I haven't.
Yeah, because I really like to take out like at least like a long weekend a year. That just where I just maybe I go hiking or something. Usually I used to do that with my mom, but now she doesn't want to go anymore. But then I do it with friends or something. So where you engage in like an activity that keeps your body busy, basically, but you also have the mental capacity to think strategically about where you're at. And then, you also can plan a bit into the future or the things that are important to you or the things that you want to do. I really recommend to do that like once a year at least, even if it's just a weekend or mini retreat, but maybe even a week, to sort of, yeah, yeah, recharge, but at the same time also, to be a bit more strategic about where you're going with your life and career.
Absolutely. I haven't been on a retreat, but I do love cycling, and I
Mhm.
do. Um, yeah, I have taken days when I've gone for like sort of 5 6 hour bike ride, which I fully appreciate may not be for everyone, but you're absolutely right around your um your body knows how to ride a bike, and therefore there's something happening, but you're not
Yeah,
overly thinking about you propelling the bike along the road. And I certainly remember when I was doing my masters, sometimes I'd have be struggling with an assignment or struggling with something, and the first time I did it, I sort of realized, yeah, and I was like, well, maybe I'll just go for a bike ride, and that I had that sense of no, I should sit at my desk longer and try and work this through. And I went for a bike ride and then realized that, to your point, that the mind releases a bit. And actually, I found myself sort of halfway through the bike ride, having sort of allowed my mind to tumble over the problem and the challenge a bit, of suddenly it unlocked. And so absolutely, I can imagine if you then scale that up from, rather than just being a morning or an afternoon, to a weekend or a week, how much
yeah,
more you could
yeah,
potentially unlock. So
yeah, yeah. And honestly, I mean, it's I think it's a secret to resilience, a secret to strategic thinking is really, relaxation. And it sounds so counterintuitive. Yeah. But
yeah,
also, I think, to be a good leader, to be an authentic or servant leader, you need to learn to relax, and you need to learn to find your middle, your balance. And also that inner force, that driving force in you. I sometimes speak of the inner creator. Yeah? So if you get access to that inner creator, that gives you all this passion that people are actually following in the world. Because we're like, very often when we think about leadership, we think about somebody like Captain America, or like superheroes, but that's not real. That's not really the essence of leadership. Is not in, if do you know Captain America by any chance?
yes. Well,
Really
not
good.
personally,
It's
but
a really good story, like it's a really good story. And he's like, originally he's this really like tiny guy, and he's not the image of a leader. So yeah, but then he leads by empathy, he leads by motivation. He has all these qualities, and that is his original, that's the original, of him, of his essence. It's got nothing to do with the body and all of that. I mean, obviously that's also nice to look at, but yeah. Anyway, I'm digressing totally. Uh, I like the Avengers. So if you think about your career and your life in Switzerland. You haven't been here that long yet. You're like in phase two of adjustment, as I usually call it. We have discussed the topic of networking and how important it is to network in Switzerland. Robert, do you have any ideas, tips for our audience on how to build a network effectively?
yes, I suppose if I was to sort of reflect, when I first joined, and I think you and I have spoken about this. Of I had real confidence in my network in London, and suddenly found that I didn't have that same quality of network here, and I suppose, like all of these things, it's make it a habit, and little and often, and it's interesting. You recently, I think it was one of your posts around your coffee chats versus expert interviews, and how do you make it meaningful? And I think so. If I sort of to combine that, of you be thoughtful about who you approach, and approach them with a purpose, and with a question. And I think, from my experience, if you go to ask people for help or insight, it's very rare that people turn you down. It's very, incredibly rare. In fact, I don't think I've ever had it that someone just outright said no. And if you approach them, with a bit of grace and humility, and you're asking for insight, and you want to sort of, I guess, tap into their knowledge and expertise. So I think, when I read that, I absolutely agree with it. Of you approach with a purpose. And I suppose if I was to look at myself, just the random blank requests you get on LinkedIn, I sort of my instant inner thought is, well, you couldn't even be bothered to write a note of, hey, we met at this event, or I saw this about you, or even just some sort of introductory effort.
Mm.
And so therefore the same must be play back when you're networking. So I think having a purpose and having a question and asking for some support or insight is very powerful. And actually a piece of advice, I was given some years ago, which I have to remind myself of, when you've had a really interesting conversation with someone and you've connected and you found it really engaging, actually that final question almost should be, is there someone else interesting you think I should meet?
Huh?
And once again, it's very rare that the answer is, no. The answer is, yes, let me introduce you to X or Y, and then you've instantly then got that next step. And I have to say, you now I've put a bit more effort into it. It's definitely it's useful, and I've made some great connections. And we're fortunate. Some of the suppliers we use at work are based here, and it's great to connect with them, and that can also open up other networks. But I think in any industry, the ability to understand what your peers are up to, and always, I guess, have that sort of that ability to do a quick sense check of when some, especially when you're dealing with crisis events or impact events, and you're looking at how are we responding, what are we doing about it. Great to be able to sense check with other people. Is that in line with how they're responding? Is there anything I've missed? Is there anything we could be doing better? Is there anything we can learn? And so having that local network is really useful from a point of view. I guess just benchmarking and sense checking, and you're having a good idea of what others are up to. And I'd also say I've certainly found in my line of work that there's less of a competitive tension, because I think when it comes to
Hmm.
people safety, and if I look at all through my career, since leaving the military, when you're dealing with people safety, especially, the competitive barriers you do tend to lower significantly, because everyone is probably focused on how do we look after our people. And I've found some of the collaboration across the network is incredibly strong. And even from my first job outside the army, where the company I worked for was part of a wider, effectively, we were in a network with all our competitors around how do we reduce crime levels in our industry. That was a partnership based on how do we work together. I guess for something that's going to benefit all of us. And so I think that's really nice to see as well. Sometimes that competitive tension isn't necessarily there. And I think when it comes to people's safety and welfare, I think that's absolutely a sort of great quality of our industry.
Yeah, I agree. It's the same in the global mobility field. I think, we're very happy to exchange thoughts, information, especially in these trying times. And I also think, it's always good to know a few people to be able to reach out to. Even, just to know, like, even just to have, like, somebody you can actually talk to, especially if you're like alone in your role in the company or in the location, or, you don't have peers that actually understand what you're doing. So it's good to have a few good people in your network that you can just call and say, look, what are you doing about this crisis that is currently happening? Final question, then we come to an end. Do you have any exciting gigs coming up, any talks? I know you recently had a workshop, but maybe you have something else that you would like to invite our audience to, or, where they can learn more about you?
Not yet. Yeah, and I said I just did your masterclass session only recently, and that was great as a sort of to you I suppose experience that, and hopefully it was useful for the participants. And I think really interesting as well to be able to, I suppose, hopefully people can you benefit from my experience around crisis management and resilience, and absolutely to your point around personal resilience as well. So not yet, but hopefully soon, and something you're happy to help people with, because I think, like I said, this is not an area where people need to be competitive, and I think as also we discussed earlier in this conversation, crisis management is more becoming everyone is touching everyone at some point. And I guess it comes back to the engineer in me and the desire to help people, and help support them, and I suppose that satisfaction if someone comes through their broken bike and you're able to fix it, and they're able to ride away, that's incredibly satisfying. I suppose I now sort of scale that up into the work that I do, and being able to help people when they reach out. So
Mhm. Fantastic. And can people contact you through LinkedIn, or do you have any other preferred
yes, yeah,
methods? Yeah,
yeah, LinkedIn is the so yeah, absolutely. If people are interested, yeah, happy to connect, and happy to help.
fantastic. Thank you so much, Robert, for this interview. It was great talking to you. Really excited. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure, Angie. All the best. Take care.
You too. Bye.